Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 15 Rankings Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to win a freaking playoff matchup, people. 14 weeks of blood, sweat, and tears have taken you to this moment. Let's go ahead and capitalize on it and get that championship banner hanging. Or maybe you're just cool enough to already have a first round bye. That is neat too. But of course, I'm joined by the one, the only Dwain, the Rock McFarland to help us accomplish all this. Happy Thursday, Dwain.
What's up, Ian? Happy Thursday. Happy playoffs. We have some teams that, playoffs already started. But for most people, the playoffs are just now starting. So, yeah, very excited.
Fun times ahead, indeed. I know there could be some heartbreak, but again, just focus on the task at hand. And with that in mind, let's do just that here on the Fantasy Live Show. It's time for our DraftKings opening lines. For those of you hanging out with us live today, first of all, thank you. What's up? Hope you're having a great day. Feel free to throw some start-sit questions throughout, and we will get to those throughout the show. But also want to update you guys on some Thursday night football news. Mike Evans is officially going to play per Jeremy Fowler. Again, been dealing with this collarbone injury. Quote, won't play every down, according to Fowler. And that kind of is what concerns me, Dwayne, because there was actually also a quote last week from offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard, basically saying that he thought they would kind of bring Evans into the lineup like they did Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving. So Godwin was really severely limited in that game. Bucky Irving wound up racking 18 touches. So it's tough, man. I've kind of gone back and forth with it. Earlier in the week, I had Evans more as a low-end wide receiver 2. Right now, I have him more as kind of a mid-tier wide receiver 3. Where do you fall with Evans ahead of Thursday night?
Yeah, so I mean, the coach speak is really funny because we just want to know, which is it? Is it the way you ease Bucky Irving in, or is it the way that you ease Chris Godwin in? Because one was not good for us in fantasy, which is the Chris Godwin scenario. And the other one, you gave a running back almost 80% of the rushing attempts in Bucky Irving. So I don't know, Ian. Like I'm being a little bit more bullish on Evans. I may still end up moving him down some, but I've got him as a low end wide receiver 2 right now. I feel like the Bucs can't afford to lose games. It was an upper body injury, so it's not like the conditioning should be bad. Like Mike Evans should be in shape. He knows Baker Mayfield. He knows the offense. There's the trust that's already there. So I lean towards him probably playing 75 to 85%, of the pass plays this weekend. And I think with Mike Evans, that's enough, man. I start looking at it, and there's some other names we really like here, but like I'm playing him over Stephon Diggs. I'm playing him over Cortland Sutton. I'm playing him over Christian Watson because he's got to play the Denver Broncos. So that's a problem I ran into. I saw those quotes too, and I went in to move him down, and I just started looking at the players around him. I'm like, man, I'm not benching Mike Evans in my playoff matchup versus some of these other names. So I'll probably hang around in that wide receiver 23 to 26 range, but I don't see getting him any closer than that. I think the real question is, honestly, if you think Evans isn't going to play as much, like, do you flip him and Emeka Egbuka? Because I've got Egbuka below Evans right now. I've got Evans 23. I've got Egbuka 26. So, like, should I flip-flop those? And in between them is Jacoby Myers and Juwan Jennings, both guys that have been in really solid roles the last few weeks. But I think that's the group, man. I don't think I can go lower than that.
I think that is the group as well. I wouldn't really put any of these guys in the circle of trust, if you will. I have Egbuka wide receiver 26, Evans wide receiver 29, Chris Godwin wide receiver 33. So when you have 3 guys that close together, it's a good way of saying I'm not really sure what exactly is going to go down. So again, I know every lineup is going to be different, but I would say just versus some of those guys, I guess let the kind of tiebreaker, Dwayne, be the overall upside of the passing game, which I would like to think is going to be higher in Tampa Bay with Evans back in the picture. But on the other side of things, man, like after 5 weeks of the season, we talked about the Egbuka drop off plenty, here on the Fantasy Live Show. But Baker Mayfield, man, has gone from being an arguable front runner for MVP to being a probably just bad quarterback based on what most of the stats are telling us, man.
Yeah, and I think the challenge, though, with Baker is it's hard to evaluate him. Early on, we had some offensive line injuries. Last week, we had an offensive line injury. But the biggest thing is he just really hasn't had all of his pass catchers at any point, right? So now you do have Bucky Irving, who you can hit out of the backfield and can give you a big play. You have Godwin, who can work the intermediate areas of the field, help you pick up first downs. You've got Mike Evans, who can stretch things out, Mike Evans can do everything, right? And that's why I struggle moving him down the ranks, because I'm like, man, I know what the ceiling of Mike Evans is. Theoretically, the floor might be lower than some of these other guys, but it's really tough. And then hopefully that frees Egbuka up, right, from having to carry the whole load, and that helps him as well. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I feel like the biggest beneficiary of all this is Baker Mayfield. Like, if this hasn't been due to Baker and it's been more due to the circumstances, this should remedy that, getting Mike Evans back.
Buccaneers, Falcons. Get your popcorn ready. I'm sure if you bench Mike Evans, he'll go off. I'm sure if you start him, he will unfortunately not have a great game. Tends to be how the fantasy gods work sometimes. The other, I would say, big news Dwayne wanted to get to early on in the show is the status of Josh Jacobs. Has started off the week with back-to-back DNPs as he continues to nurse his knee injury. He actually said to reporters himself that he considers himself day-to-day, noted that he underwent another MRI on Monday just to make sure it wasn't getting worse. It did come back clean, but he did note that he's dealing with swelling and it kicked in again versus the Bears. So did not make a declaration for Sunday yet. God forbid Emmanuel Wilson is still available in your guys' league. Yes, you should certainly have him handcuffed for Josh Jacobs at this time. If we do see Josh Jacobs out of the picture, though, Dwayne, how high would you rank Emmanuel Wilson? For me, I do think that RB17 spot right behind Quinshon Judkins makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is we saw in week 12 what we can get from Emmanuel Wilson. He had 74% of the rushing attempts in that game without Josh Jacobs. He scored 26.5 fantasy points. So a lot of the long down and distance work, a lot of the obvious passing down stuff did go to Chris Brooks, which we would probably expect again. But I think the high leverage touches that we care about, and mainly where Josh Jacobs gets his value, Ian, is down inside that 5-yard line. I think most of that work will go through Emmanuel Wilson. So I was looking at the ranks ahead of the show, just looking at where I would be moving him if we had Jacobs out. And it was in a similar spot. So if you look at it, I've got RJ Harvey at 15. I'm keeping him above Emmanuel Wilson. But then you get to Ashton Genty, Quinshon Judkins, and Travion Henderson. I think I'm going to play him above all of those. Genty's got to play the Eagles. You got Quinshon. We just have a lot more questions about the offense. The Bears aren't a terrible matchup or anything. And then with Travion, we love him, but the last game we saw, the last data point we have was Ramondre Stevenson as the running back 1 and Travion as the running back 2.
Judkins, that's maybe the one where we're slight disagreement on. I do think Judkins, again, with Jerome Ford on IR and Dylan Sampson not practicing, maybe we legit see like a 90% roll out of him, which would be pretty cool. But either way, guys, it's right in that kind of mid-tier RB2 range. So keep that in mind. But I'm assuming, again, if you do have Emmanuel Wilson with no Josh Jacobs, more likely than not that you would be trying to start him. That is going to be, I believe, one of those late afternoon games. There are 5 of them this week. Usually we get 3. Now we're getting 5 for some reason. So it just continues to really piss me off on a day-to-day basis with the way the NFL handles that late afternoon Sunday schedule. Bigger problems in the world. I get it. But my whole point is you might have more options than usual if you do have to wait until, that kind of 2:30 or so point in Sunday afternoon when they do end up announcing those inactive. So more and more injuries we'll get to throughout the show, guys. The one other one I want to bring up, though, is that Steelers edge TJ Watt dealing with a lung issue. He was actually at the hospital after experiencing discomfort at the practice facility on Wednesday. So get better, Mr. Watt. They were saying Mike Tomlin is going to update the media a little bit, later on Thursday. So hopefully we hear good news there. But yeah, certainly would not help the Steelers' chances of shutting down the Dolphins all the way up there on Monday Night Football. With that, though, guys, let's get into the show. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I have teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6 to give you a new way to get in on the action. With Pick 6, you ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will a player score more or less than number listed? You put your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, guys, there's an incredible offer. New DraftKings Pick 6 customers play $5 or more on your first pick set and get $50 in bonus picks. That's right. New customers play $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride the upside. Download DraftKings Pick 6. Get on all the action. Sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. Thanks to DraftKings Pick 6 for sponsoring this. Let's make the season one to remember. Showing off our consensus RB rankings here on the Fantasy Life Show, led off by Jahmyr Gibbs, Mr. RB1, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson, James Cook rounding out the top 5. We got Derrick Henry set to smash against the Bengals as our RB6, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, and Javonte Williams rounding out the top 12. As we transition to the RB2 tier of things, I do think you guys will start to see that tier break around the RB16, RB17 mark. We got Etienne as RB13, though, followed by RJ Harvey, Kyron Williams, Quinshon Judkins, and Ashton Genty. And Dwayne, I do think I probably draw the line right after Judkins there, because again, following Judkins, we got Genty, Marks, Breece Hall, Henderson, Hampton, Warren, Swift, and Neal. Not saying we can't trust those guys, but just in terms of trying to look at the combination of offensive firepower and the workload afforded, for me, it's right around Kyron and Judkins.
Yeah, I think Kyron is the obvious spot. If we don't have Dylan Sampson this weekend, Quinshon Judkins like definitely joins the group, right? The question is like, do we move him up closer to Etienne? But the bottom line is he would be in that tier with those guys above, Travis Etienne, RJ Harvey, and Kyron Williams. But for right now, I think that after Kyron Williams is really where the line draws. You know, we've got volume to Quinshawn, not a great offense. Volume to Genty, not a great offense. Likely volume to Woody Marks, not a great offense. Same story for Breece Hall. Trevion, nice matchup. We know what he can do, but having to share the backfield. So yeah, everybody else below that has their own question marks.
Speaking of some of those injuries, did want to quickly run through the running back position, starting off with Mr. RB17, Woody Marks. Did not practice on Wednesday. However, he did get back to a limited session on Thursday. So tentatively tracking to play. And a nice matchup, Dwain, as a big-time favorite here against the Arizona Cardinals. So this one will be in Houston. Again, our RB17 is someone that now that we can feel better about his health, we should feel pretty good about getting the lineups of most shapes and sizes.
Yeah, Marx's inefficiency, it's well documented. We've talked about it many times. If you're on any sort of social media, it's been talked about by a lot of people a lot. But the bottom line is he had a 72% snap share, 73% of the rushing attempts over the last 5 games. And then last week with Nick Chubb exiting early, and he handled 89% of the snaps. So we'll see what ends up happening with Chubb and Marks himself. But if he is active, and if Chubb is not active, right, we're going to see probably 75% of the snaps, maybe 80% go to him. I would expect a little bit more to Dare Ogunbowale with a full week to prepare. So I don't think we would see like a 90% snap share, but it's not out of the picture. So I think he's in a really good spot. If you look at the Texans, they're 10-point favorites right now in Friedman's betting model over on the site, guys, with a 25.1 team total. So we like it when we have teams that are nice favorites and have a high team total. Historically, that is a good thing for a running back with a workload like what we expect from Woody Marks.
Another running back who started off the week with a DNP, but is now tracking to play after getting a limited session is Jets RB Breece Hall. So will be Isaiah Davis if he is out of the picture. But again, certainly seems like he is tracking to suit up this Sunday. So when we do have a running back, unfortunately, expecting to miss more time, and that is Mr. Alvin Kamara over there with the Saints. Back-to-back DNPs to start this week. Devin Neal also on the injury report with an abdomen injury. However, he has been limited in both of these games to start off the week. So honestly, I've actually got Neal up, I think, a little bit higher than you and some of the other rankers, because for me, it's just a situation where I put him ahead of some of the guys who are more so in those 1-2 back committees. I think Neal's more of a workhorse. And no, it's the Saints offense. I understand we're not talking about the 99 Rams here, but maybe I'm drinking the Shuck Kool-Aid a little bit more than I should. I feel like Devin Neal, man, should be winning out in the majority of close start sit decisions.
Well, I mean, when you look at it in the 2 games without Kamara, yeah, I mean, the workload is there. He's the same thing basically as Woody Marks. So I think you can put him anywhere in a range where you're in a similar spot to Marks. The difference is that the Texans have a good defense and their offense is slightly better than what we have with New Orleans. But I don't think it's a slam dunk, right, that their offense is that much better than the Saints. But in these games without Kamara, we've had 77% of the snaps go to Devin Neal, 62% of the rushing attempts, 71% route participation rate. He had an 8% target share, and he was a pretty good receiver out of the backfield in college. So he's not the priority. They've got Chris Olave to throw the ball to Juwan Johnson. Over the last couple of weeks, they've gotten Devon Vele more involved. But there's always a chance when you're running that many routes, Ian, like you could just pop up with like a 15-20% target share game. So definitely in the range of outcomes. Yeah, I have Neal as a borderline RB2, but I think anywhere in that like RB like 25 to 20 range, like he's in a group of guys there where, yeah, you can be starting him.
Otherwise, guys, Chris Rodriguez also looking better. Missed Wednesday's practice with a groin injury. Was limited, though, on Thursday. And then we mentioned the one injury to keep an eye out on is with Dylan Sampson. Has not been practicing this week due to a calf issue. Running backs who should be good to go. Tyron Tracy practicing in full coming out of the bye. Devon Etienne started off the week with a limited session ahead of Monday Night Football. And just based on what we've heard from him and Mike McDaniel, seems like he will be fine for that one. Amari DiMercado and Keaton Mitchell, also guys who have been practicing in a limited fashion this week. Dwain, someone who is not banged up and someone just keeps on racking up fantasy points is our upgrade of the week, and that is Jaguars RB1, Travis Etienne, someone who, again, has been balling this whole season. He is the RB12 in PPR points per game, but man, Dwain, that's where we have him ranked this week, but that might be too low if we see the usage that happened last week after Bashaw Tootin fumbled persist into week 15.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things working for Etienne. Number one, to your point, like he's just been playing well. I mean, if we look at it going back to the week 8 bye, the Jaguars have really changed their identity since that point. They have a -3% drop back rate over expected. So really leaning into the ground game. He's averaged 16.1 fantasy points over that stretch as the running back 11. So if you look at him over that span, 17.2 carries and 2.7 targets per game with a 74 utilization score. That's really solid. Jaguars 11.5-point favorites with a 26.6 point team total in Friedman's model. So again, we've got the combination of a big spread along with a nice total for the team. And to your point, Bajal Tutin fumbling 2 times last week. We don't expect that, guys, to bleed over into this week. In fact, I have the backfield really projected the way that it's been before last week. But there is a chance, Ian. Like they could keep Bajal Tutin on the bench and just shorten, the way that they're handling things and give more of the work to Travis Etienne. And if they do, like he's going to be even more valuable than the way we have him projected. Right now, he's got a 22.7 Xfinity best ceiling in PPR with a 14.4 median, a 10.7 floor. But if I knew that they were not going to use Bajal Tutin as much and treat him the way they did last week due to the fumbles, he would be a top 6 running back in our fantasy projections.
That certainly is a ceiling at hand against the Jets defense that again has been one of the worst in the league against opposing rushing attacks and accordingly opposing running backs as well. That said, Dwayne, they are not as bad as the matchup that King Henry is getting this Sunday, facing off against the Cincinnati Bengals defense that he didn't exactly go crazy against a couple of weeks ago, but that was primarily because Rasheen freaking Ali was out snapping the guy. So this just annoys me, man, because I just, I'm not a professional coach or anything like that. I don't ever hope to be, but maybe we'll see what happens, Dwayne. But no, all jokes aside, like Rasheen Ali, man, I just can't even imagine like just the lack of terror would be the opposite. The relief, if you will, that defenses probably have when they look in the backfield and they see Rasheen freaking Ali instead of Derrick Henry out there. So as long as Derrick Henry is actually working as the Ravens lead RB1, you think that he can go nuclear against this Bengals defense this week.
Yeah, the only difference is in previous years, like with the previous version of the Ravens offense and just the Ravens team, right, in general, that we have more confidence in this kind of matchup, we would have Derrick Henry as a top 3 back. We have him as a top 6 back, guys. That makes him a must start. He's just the kryptonite is the trailing game scripts, and the Ravens have just had a higher tendency to put themselves in those situations this year, Ian. And we know what happens because this is a tale as old as time. That's always been the Achilles heel for Derrick Henry, getting taken off the field on passing downs, really regardless of whatever the running back 2's name is. Just insert name here. They're going to play over Derrick Henry on passing downs. Right now, it does happen to be Rasheen Ali. I do agree with you. I don't know that Rasheen Ali is necessarily some special kind of player that I would be. Honestly, if I was a defensive back, I would be a lot more worried about Derrick Henry catching a ball in the flat than Rasheen Ali catching a ball. So, but we know what the Ravens' plans are, and it is that they're not going to use Derrick Henry that often on passing down. He's had a slight uptick in target share over these last 3 or 4 games, so he's getting a little bit more work there. So, bottom line is, guys, you're playing against the Bengals. They're the number 1 boost in our DVP tool over at Fantasy Life for opposing running backs at an additional 6.6 fantasy points per game to opposing running back room. So in a really good spot, got a great team total. The only thing that could make it go sideways is if the Bengals just come out and put them in a hole. And it's possible because you've got Joe Burrow, you've got a good offense like the Bengals did it last week to the Bills. That's the sort of game script we can't see from Derrick Henry because if that happens, we know that makes him more of a mid-range running back too.
Again, I don't quite get it. He's only got 1 drop this year. He's one of only 6 running backs averaging north of 10 yards per reception. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what Dwayne and I think. We are doing our best to try to figure out what those Ravens coaches think. Dwayne, another running back who, again, in this matchup last year would probably be the overall RB1, but it is 2025, not 2024. So Saquon Barkley, our RB7 going up against the Raiders defense that, yes, has Max Crosby, but could be lacking motivation otherwise during the course of what has, again, been a pretty much lost season at this point. So Saquon Barkley, maybe he didn't exactly get your team to playoffs, but worst case, Dwayne, I think we could see some fireworks in those consolation brackets.
Yeah, I mean, and I have a couple of teams with Barkley on it that are in the playoffs. Like, it just really depends. Like, if you took JSN and other players, like you might be in a good situation here. But when you look at Barkley, he has the combination that we just talked about for these other backs, Ian, 12.5-point favorites. That's the second largest on the slate with a 25.5 team total. That's the 8th highest. Does Jalen Hurts scare us sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. He can steal the touchdowns, and he can also just have a complete meltdown. But still, the Eagles' offense overall, for all the problems we have with it, it's still a very talented group. They're still projected for a good team total by Vegas. So I know last week was absolutely terrible for the Eagles overall, besides Barkley, who gave you 18.2 fantasy points. But I still think that they'll end up being fine, Ian. And like the Eagles offensive line, man, if it can just get healthy and stay that way, that's really good for Barkley, who's still getting 71% of the rushing attempts, man. Like, he's getting plenty of work. We just haven't had the same efficiency as last season, but at least he looked good last week against a pretty good Chargers unit.
Sounds like Lane Johnson's still a week away from returning, but that will certainly be huge once he does get back from that foot injury. And yeah, Raiders 23rd in PPR points per game allowed to opposing RBs. Next 2 weeks are going to be the Commanders and Bills, 27th and 26th respectfully. So hopefully, again, Saquon starts to really here end the season on a strong note. Dwayne, Patriots running back, not Travion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson might actually be someone that people should be looking at in that kind of throw up in your mouth flex situation. Okay, no, we're not ranking Stevenson as his top 15 running back. And yes, we do have Travion ranked higher, but look, as much as Travion might be the just more efficient running back, the more explosive pass catcher, what have you, Stevenson, as we kind of saw in this first matchup against the Bills, can still make his money just by being the lead goal line back when he had 14 carries for 14 yards, I should say, and 2 touchdowns against the Bills back in week 5. So again, I think the Giants running backs and Ramondre Stevenson, you could also argue Chris Rodriguez, like those are the sort of RB3 flex types where, again, you might not have better options. And I do think we actually could see them help us out here in week 15.
Yeah, absolutely. And full disclaimer, we are not Mike Vrabel mind readers. We will never be able to accomplish that, no matter how hard we try. There's no model. There's no insider information. There's nothing we could possibly get that would help us better forecast what Mike Vrabel's going to do. He's just going to do what he's going to do. He's really along that vein of what Arthur Smith does, Ian. We just kind of have to live with whatever it is. But the last time we saw the Patriots, it was Ramondre Stevenson as the lead back. Now they're coming out of a bye. Maybe they've come to their senses and they want to put Travion Henderson in there as the running back 1. But they just saw Travion Henderson go bananas and still opted to work Ramondre Stevenson back into the running back 1 role for the team. So while it could go Henderson's way, like, I have it projected for a slight lead for Ramondre in touches. I still have Hendo with a slightly better projection because of his efficiency. But yeah, he can fit into a lineup as a running back 3, as an extra flex, especially for you guys that play in leagues where you got 2 flex spots. If you look at Buffalo, they've given up the 6th best fantasy boost to opposing running backs at 2.4 fantasy points per game. So we got that going for us. And guys, maybe the big takeaway here is Friedman has the Patriots as a 4-star bet to cover the spread against the Patriots. Now, keep an eye on the updates. Friedman will be updating the model with injuries and all that stuff over the rest of today and tomorrow. But as of yesterday, that was one of his better bets in his model.
Again, Dwayne and I both have Ramondre Stevenson as our RB32. Someone we will be starting ahead of him, though, is Chiefs RB1 here, Kareem Hunt. Dwayne's RB31, my RB28. Hey, why not? He's been the RB20 in PPR points per game since originally taking over as a starter back in week 8. And despite the return of Isaiah Pacheco, Dwayne, we still have seen Hunt be actually the one commanding the best utilization.
Yeah, over the last 2 games with Isaiah Pacheco back. Now, we don't know if it's because they're easing him in due to injury or anything like that, but we have to go off the data that we have, right? And when we look at Kareem Hunt over that stretch, 63% of the snaps, 62% of the rushing attempts, and almost a 60% route participation rate. So that's a running back 1, guys. There's a lot of running backs that we would love to have that sort of utilization. Is Kareem Hunt as explosive as some of the other players we would like to be seeing getting that workload? No, but he does get a lot of work down inside the 5, Ian. In fact, like each week, whenever I start isolating down to, okay, what players do I think are most likely to score a touchdown this week? The name that pops up right away in the projection model every time that surprises me, and it probably shouldn't anymore, it's Kareem Hunt. And it's because the guy has opportunities to score touchdowns. So we like that in fantasy. He's a mid-range running back 3, 17.3 Xfinity best ceiling. So yes, another guy that's very usable, even though we are now into the playoffs for you guys playing in these deep leagues.
Takes us to the Sicko start of the week. And if you guys haven't checked out Dwayne's weekly ranking column, you should definitely do so. It is very much free on fantasylife.com, loaded with fun nuggets, many of which, again, we're talking about here, but also some maybe you should go catch over there. And Dwayne, I love your accountability, okay? For your Sicko start section, you list who you said every single week, and you go back through and you say if it was a hit or a miss. However, last week's hit was so good, it did not just say hit, it actually said, oh, baby, for Mr. Blake Corum. So do you have another oh, baby for us here in week 15, Dwayne?
Man, I don't know that we can hit the way we did on Corum last week. Obviously, he came through in a huge way if you did have to use him with 26 fantasy points. But yeah, I'm going to go with Devin Singletary of the Giants. Ian, only rostered in 29% of Yahoo leagues. That's the rule, guys. They have to be rostered in less than 50%. And they also have some sort of projectable volume where I can actually look you with a straight face, or if you're listening, my face is straight. I promise right now. And when you look at Singletary, we've really got a split workload here. Like, yes, Tyrone Tracy is the running back one, but here's the big thing, man. Since Mike Kafka has taken over as the interim head coach for the Giants, a minus 13% drop back rate over expected in his 3 games as the head coach. So I don't know. The Giants either Kafka is just a big believer in the run, or they're just trying to run the clock out on the season. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's led to plenty of touches for these two guys. So Singletary's averaged 14 rushing attempts in and 1.3 targets under Kafka, really playing as the running back too. It's more of a 1A, 1B kind of scenario here, but it has been Tracy in the lead role, and he's still getting these opportunities. So the Commanders have given up a 5.3 fantasy boost points per game. So that is the second best, or that's the third best of the matchups for this week. And if we look at the Giants, they're 2.5-point underdogs, but this is expected to be a close game with them in Washington. It's not like we expect the Commanders to run away with the game. So feels like a manageable game script. The one big thing for Singletary, Ian, is he's had 88% of the short yardage carries 88% of the short yardage snaps over this period with Kafka. So that makes him the guy that's most likely to score a touchdown and potentially 2. So his Xfinity best ceiling is 15.6, median projection of 8.8. And like I said, guys, still available in a ton of leagues.
And this surprised me, man, because from Sunday to basically like Thursday afternoon, like much of my life is just surrounding, looking up different stats and watching film and talking to you. And it's a great life. All right. But I will say the one crazy thing that just shocked me this week, over the course of the Giants' last 3 games, Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary have combined for 4 top 15 finishes, guys. So yeah, Singletary did get one when we did see Tracy, get injured a little bit early in that game. But even in the 2 previous games where Tracy was fully healthy, 31 touches, 94 yards, and to Dwayne's point on the goal line, 2 touchdowns for Singletary. So love that call. And again, should be certainly in play and flex consideration. Someone for my Hartitz heater, who again is ranked a little bit higher, but also I do not think he should be completely shying away from. Ashton Genty, guys, who yes is going up against the Eagles, but also is going up against the Jalen Carter-less Eagles that have been not nearly even close to the same sort of monsters. So we've actually seen now 3 games without Jalen Carter. Week 1 with Javonte Williams, went for 20.4 PPR points. We saw Scatterboo hang 31 points on them when, again, we didn't have Carter in the picture. And then last Monday night, Kamani Vidal and Amari Hampton combined for north of 25 PPR points. So I do think Genty before last week was also starting to round into form a bit more as a receiver. He actually had 24 targets over his previous 3 games. And again, it's a situation where I just think the volume and also low-key not that bad of a matchup should win out in closer start-sit decisions when you're looking at Genty versus some of these more committee sort of backfields. So I am playing Genty over the Amarian Hamptons and Travion Hendersons of the world. I do think there's still a case, for Kyron Williams and Quinshon Judkins and yes, Emmanuel Wilson if Josh Jacobs is sidelined to go ahead and just try to trust those better offenses over someone like Genty. But again, would not dismiss the possibility for him to boom. As we know, he does have that big play ability to hopefully make his money in just 1 or 2 touches. So give me Genty again, 20 plus PPR points against the Eagles. What could go wrong? Hopefully not anything, because guys, we got some start sit questions to get to. It is time for our start sit minute here, presented by Xfinity. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us live here on the Fantasy Life Show. Time to get to some of your start-sit questions. Dwayne starting off with our guy Jamie wondering in full PPR starting 1 between T. Higgins, Brian Thomas Jr., Bretton Strange, Mike Gesicki, and Chris Rodriguez. If he does play, man, it's going to be T. Higgins. But let's say he doesn't, because that makes things a little bit more interesting. I think I lean Brian Thomas Jr. over Chris Rodriguez, but that would probably be who it's between.
Yes, I do too. Those guys project close. And we did see Chris Rodriguez get a pretty big workload last week, almost 60% of the rushing attempts. So I'll say this. I do think that Rodriguez is probably still the floor play. Like if you not foreplay, guys, the floor play. So if you are favored in your matchup, I might lean Chris Rodriguez. But if you need the upside and it's anything close, I'm just going with BTJ, Ian. He still has the big playability. He's on the field plenty. Trevor Lawrence is playing a little bit better over this last month, so I'm with you.
And I was reading a good article from Ben Solak over at ESPN. He does this like kind of big takeaways every, I think, Tuesday afternoon. And he was actually bringing up how the emergence of Jacoby Myers in that Jaguars offense has almost like allowed BTJ to fit more into just that more pure field stretcher role, Jameson Williams sort of role, if you will, where, yeah, we'll take more targets overall. I get it, but it does seem like, again, this Jaguars offense maybe starting to groove at the right time. So I am with you there. From MH1608, we are starting Jalen Hurts over Jackson Dart. I know last week was an atrocity, but we'll talk more about Dart here in a little bit and maybe his lack of rushing that we've seen. From the Hoff 305, though, Dwayne, we need 2 flexes here in full PPR. Omarion Hampton, Devin Neal, Jalen Warren, and then we got Stephon Diggs and Michael Wilson, if no Marv. I will say, if no Marv, we are going to lock in Michael Wilson. So, Dwayne, it would be between Hampton, Diggs, Neal, and Jalen Warren.
Yeah, I'm putting them in right now into the Xfinity start sit tool, which you guys can check out. Obviously, yeah, Michael Wilson stands at the top. We do not have Marv in our projections right now. But then it goes Devin Neal, then Stephon Diggs, then Omarion Hampton. I do think that Hampton and Diggs are a close call. The problem is, like, we don't know for sure, Ian, how to project the backfield. Like, we don't know how quickly they'll flip things back to Hampton. I think he will end up being the lead ball carrier this weekend with Vidal still spelling him on passing downs, but I'm purely speculating on that. We could see the same role we saw last week where Vidal gets, 65% of the snaps or 60% of the snaps, and it's Hampton playing running back too. So we'll be watching or we'll be listening for more news on that. But yeah, I do think it's Michael Wilson and Devin Neal that are in for me here.
Nate Deasy's wondering if he should drop Emeka Ibuka. Hopefully can pick him up next week for Emmanuel Wilson. It would have to be very weird, man. I'm not saying it couldn't be this case, but I'm talking like if you have Josh Jacobs, another running back, and just literally no one else, and then you're not going to be having any place to start Emeka Ibuka. But I'm just guessing, man, there's got to be a better cut option for you on that roster. Please try to find it. So again, Emeka is someone who I know has been disappointed, but we do not want to cut. Dwayne, though, Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, a situation where I think Joey B's been playing good enough football to probably get the nod here.
Yeah, I have Burrow ahead of Mahomes in the ranks this week. That's where I'm going to go. The projections slightly lean to Mahomes, but not by very much. Burrow, I don't know, man. Again, like if T. Higgins is active, for sure it's Burrow. If T. Higgins is out, I think it's a coin flip between the two players. But I like Joe Burrow's matchup better. You've got the Chiefs having to play against the Chargers, who have been really good against the pass here over the last 5-6 weeks. Well, really for the whole season, but they have really honed in over the last 6 games. So I have a slight lean to Joe Burrow, but it is a very close call, guys.
That was another surprising stat I stumbled upon this week. Since week 8, guys, we've seen this Chargers defense second to only the Seahawks in terms of EPA allowed per dropback. That's right, even better than the Houston Texans during that span. From our guy Bogies Ross, sit 1.5 PPR, Tedrow McMillan, Jalen Warren, Omarion Hampton, and Chris Godwin. I think I'm pretty comfortably sitting Chris Godwin there, Dwayne.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Jose Rodriguez needs us to pick 2. Let's see. We have Wilson. Sorry, kind of weird. Wilson, Evan, Ted McMillan, Jennings, and Judy pick 2. Jose, work on your freaking messaging, man. I appreciate you, though. Let's see.
Yeah, because I don't even know what names you just said.
I'm guessing it's Emmanuel Wilson, so we'll see what happens there. If Jacobs ends up being out, then okay. I would start we're not starting Judy. So it's Mike Evans, Tedrow McMillan, Juwan Jennings. How do you have them ranked, Dwayne?
I'm looking at it right now. So McMillan versus Evans and Jennings. I have Evans at the top of that list, but you might have it slightly different. I've got Ted McMillan at the top, then Mike Evans, then Juwan Jennings, and obviously we already eliminated Jerry Jeudy. So again, like if you are needing floor, I lean to Juwan Jennings. If you do need the higher ceiling, we know what Mike Evans' ceiling is. Even if he plays 80% of the routes, it could be 3 touchdowns, and I get it. Juwan Jennings has a ceiling too, but Mike Evans has a historic, ceiling that we've seen come through in many, 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 many games. So I've got it as Ted McMillan number 1, Mike Evans number 2, then Juwan, and the projections are in the same order.
Good question from Sam Watts here. Jacoby Myers or Devontae Smith? Obviously been a little bit more of the A.J. Brown show here recently. I have Devontae ranked higher. You do as well, Dwayne. So, yeah, I guess give us Devontae.
Yeah, but I understand if someone wants to go with Myers just based on what's happened. I get you're going to feel more comfortable. They project super close. And what I tell people is when it comes down to something like this, go with the player that you want to go with, right? Like we do have Devontae slightly ahead in the projections and in the rankings, but I totally get why you would have the thought process that, I might just go with Jacoby Myers. And he's outperformed Devontae Smith over the last several games. So very close call. I would go with your gut.
I'm with you. Go with your gut, or feel free to blame us and go with Devontae Smith if it doesn't work out. Last one from Donovan. Okay, Dwayne, we need to sit one between Emeka Egbuka, Travion Henderson, Woody Marks, Rico Dowdle, and Tedero McMillan. That is tough, man. It's probably Egbuka, but man, you're talking about, again, 5 guys are all kind of in that same range. But this is what we're paid to do, Dwayne. So who are we sitting?
Yeah, so it's McMillan, Egbuka. I was trying to see this one. We've got what? Marks and Rico Dowdle. Mm-hmm. Is that the list? Okay.
Egbuka, Travion, Marks, Rico, and Tedero. Just sit one.
Have to sit one. I'm sitting Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, I think I am too.
I just
Rico versus Egbuka.
Now here's number one. Rico's dealing with an injury right now. He's got a quad injury. Number 2, the last game we saw.
He's fine. Underdog messed that up. He is not on the injury report.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. I don't even care. Last game we saw Chuba Hubbard, right? Took over. He had the lead role in the backfield. They did feed Rico in the second half. My problem is it's going to be a split backfield. So I feel like it's Rico or Travion Henderson that you're benching. Emeka Egbuka, even though he's going to have Mike Evans rejoining, and I know he's going to be out there 85-90%. 5% of the routes, Ian. He's going to be on the field. He's going to get his opportunities. I do not know for sure what's going to happen with Rico Dowdle. It would not surprise me if they gave 70% of the work to Chuba Hubbard. Wouldn't surprise me if they split it down the middle. Same thing can be said for Travion Henderson.
And Rico also just hasn't been playing his best football lately. That's why also it hasn't been all that surprising to see Chuba get more involved. And maybe it was an injury that he was dealing with before the bye a little bit that we can, go ahead and put the blame on. But regardless, I am with Dwayne. Go ahead and sit down Rico. We'll see what happens. Guys, again, this has been our Xfinity Start Sit Minute here. And now a quick word to our friends at Xfinity. Guys, if you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the best games all in one place so you can become the best at watching sports. From the Sports Zone, which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games, highlights and alerts all in one place, to the multi-view option, which allows you to be in up to 4 stadiums at once, to the Xfinity Fan View, which features live scores, odds, and stats all in one place, personalized to you. And oh yeah, did I mention all this is in Xfinity Enhanced 4K, a simply stunning viewing experience. To check all this out, just use your voice remote and say football to find it all. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy Xfinity. Imagine that. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Do note that restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Tax and fees are extra and subject to change. Breaking down the Week 15 ranks on the Fantasy Life Show. Moving on with our wide receivers. Jamar Chase sitting as the wide receiver 1, but let's face it, it really is a big tier at the top. Between Chase, Jackson Smith, Najigba, Puka Nacua, and you could probably even argue Rashee Rice. Our one true sun god Amon-Ra St. Brown coming in as our wide receiver 5, followed by Nico Collins, CeeDee Lamb, assuming he does play through that concussion, Devontae Adams, George Pickens, A.J. Brown, Michael Wilson without Marvin Harrison Jr., and Chris Olave rounding out our top 12. Things start to get a little bit more dicey as we get into our wide receiver 2 range of things. Jalen Waddle starting off as our wide receiver 13, followed by Jamison Williams, Tedero McMillan, Zay Flowers coming off a big game. Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf as wide receiver 18 is expecting to play despite having that stomach issue. Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver 19, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 20, followed by Lab McConkey, Justin Jefferson, Jacoby Myers, and Juwan Jennings to finish things out. Dwayne, I know on Monday I was a little bit cranky. I was upset that Justin Jefferson sent my stupid helicopter crashing down to earth once again. I have moved him up to about wide receiver 24 territory, okay? So I'm not completely as high as you guys, but at the end of the day, it is the Cowboys corners, man.
Yeah, it's the Cowboys corners. That's it. And just looking at this list, again, when you get into this wide receiver 2 range, any one of these guys could be the guy going off, right? I worry that we've moved DK Metcalf up too much based off of one game. It's been a terrible season for DK Metcalf, and we've got him at wide receiver 20 now. But when you start looking at all the other guys that he's around, Ian, it's okay, really, we've got a lot of guys that have questions. We have a lot of players with talent, but none of these are very clear cut. So Justin Jefferson staying inside the top 24, and man, guys, if you look at the Vikings, like I know that their quarterback situation is terrible, but they have a good run out the rest of the way. I mean, nobody has better matchups than Justin Jefferson over these next 3 weeks.
It's about to say, man, if we want to do a circle of trust, like Jalen Waddle, Jameson Williams, if you wanted to be nice to T-Mac, that's fine, but it's no higher than Zay Flowers, Dwayne.
Yeah, no, I think really the circle of trust cuts off on page 1. The top 12 guys that we were looking at. That, I mean, seriously, because all these guys, like, to your point on Jalen Waddle, I get what you're saying. Like, we know the target shares have been there, but we've got a cold weather game coming up. Tua's terrible in cold weather, and we're talking about the real cold weather that really does bother Tua. Going to be a really cold game on Monday night. The Pittsburgh Steelers, depending on what version of their defense shows up, and if they have TJ Watt, to your point, for not TJ Watt from earlier. Like, we'll see what happens with all that. But there's holes, man. There's holes with all those guys. So I think that the circle of trust is higher up in the list. The next group, again, all talented players, but figuring out which one of them is going to boom and dud, that is very, very dicey stuff.
Speaking of weather, we tentatively don't expect any brutally bad weather games. There are a lot of games that are going to be cold. The Chicago Browns game in particular is going to be like with the wind chill potentially below zero and it feels like temperature scenario. But again, shout out to Kevin Roth over at rotogrinders.com. He has everything in that yellow tier, okay? So nothing in that, red, just, oh my gosh, we really need to be downgrading guys right now. The Colts Seahawks game is actually the only one that is expected to have anything sort of to, significant rain as well. So keep an eye. We're doing this on Thursday afternoon. Kevin does a great job updating it throughout the weekend, but right now don't think there's any super meaningful downgrades we need to make due to Mother Nature.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, and it's all in the projection model, guys. Like, I check on this on each day, right? And I work with Chris Allen, who is the weather whisperer here at Fantasy Life, and we know based on the research that he's done how much we adjust the projections down. I will say that Vegas is moving the lines. Based on where we started the week, based on the cold weather, the lines are already moving down as far as the passing totals go. So I had already projected most of it in there. Like, I did have to make a slight adjustment today on the Chicago game because it does sound a little bit worse. So when it's really, really cold, it can make it harder for the guys to catch the ball. And the bigger thing is the coaches will sometimes lean more into the run game in those scenarios. But to Ian's point, nothing where it's like, and it's not an Armageddon situation. We just are seeing slight downticks in the passing total projections for this week.
If you guys do want to hear from Chris, you can check out him and myself on the Fantasy Life Start Sit Hour every Sunday morning. We get things kicked off at 10 a.m. And just, Dwayne, it is hilarious, like, listening to Chris talk about weather. And I mean that affectionately, like he's the man. I love everything he says about it. But, well, yeah, I'll bring up like the wind, and it's like, well, it's 20-mile-per-hour wind, Chris. And he goes, well, the thing is, like, the East-West Stadium profile in Los Angeles, when you consider the height of the actual walls, like, he has literally thought of everything that there is to do with the weather. And guess what? We thank him for that. So hopefully see you guys there. Did want to run through some injury situations before, again, we get to our upgrades and other notes of the week. Starting off with Devontae Adams not practicing with a hamstring issue on Wednesday. This was the same routine as last week, though, and he didn't even have a questionable tag going into the weekend. So expecting Devontae to be fine, as will Tutu Atwell, Dwayne, back with a hamstring injury. But let's face it, this is the Los Angeles Rams, where anytime they get inside the 5-yard line, it does seem like that football is going to Devontae Adams. So once again, a consensus top 10 wide receiver, really been one of the better, I would say, third or fourth round picks wherever he was going back in August, picks of the season.
Yeah, I only gave us 6.9 fantasy points last week. So I'm slightly, worried about the hamstring thing, Ian. But then I look at the game, I'm like, oh, they're playing the Lions. I mean, this could be an absolute shootout, guys. They've got if you look at the Rams, they've got a 30.5 team total. And if you look at what we could get from the Lions, like, this could be the game of the week. And the Lions, man, they've green-lighted a massive fantasy upgrade to opposing wide receivers with a 6.3 fantasy boost per game to opposing wide receiver room. So that's the second best matchup on the season. Adams projects for 14.2 fantasy points, but he's a 21.3 Xfinity best ceiling. And remember, guys, the Xfinity best ceiling is that reasonable ceiling. The outlier ceiling here for Adams is closer to 30 points because we know the guy can come up with multiple touchdowns. But we'll keep an eye on the hamstring injury, and we will be updating the ranks and the projections as the week carries on.
For what it's worth, eye test didn't see it really impacting him last week. He was open for a short touchdown. Stafford overthrew him there. And then he actually got loose for what would have been a nice 45-yard touchdown. Defender basically had to reach out and grab him to prevent that from going down as well. Otherwise, Dwayne, we do have Broncos wide receiver Pat Bryant dealing with a hamstring injury. He is not practicing and also is expected to be out. So Troy Franklin, obviously not been the most efficient wide receiver in the world, but if you are in a bind, he is going to be back to, again, being projected as the Broncos' number 2 wide receiver. That said, let's face it, really the biggest injury to keep an eye out for for with the wide receiver position is the status of Marvin Harrison Jr. Still not practicing with that heel injury. That said, Dwayne, this time Michael Wilson really is going to have one heck of a challenge against the Houston Texans. As we showed earlier, he still is in our top 12. So we are basically, trying to still trust Michael Wilson here. And I think he did a good job describing this on the utilization report pod. Just once you actually start breaking down the impact of the defense on the volume, it's like, yeah, it impacts him, but it probably won't drop him out of the wide receiver 1 range if he continues to do Michael Wilson things.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's had 16 targets per game, guys, and 190 air yards in the 3 contests without Marvin Harrison Jr. So let's say the Texans take away 30% of those targets, and they limit him to a 50% catch rate. That would still be 5.6 catches, right? That's probably something closer to his floor. I mean, there's always a chance they just completely shut them down. The Texans are the third toughest matchup from a fantasy standpoint, minus 5.5 fantasy boost on the season. Very, very good unit. But again, he projects for 14 fantasy points with us already factoring in a deduction to Jacoby Brissett's yards per attempt, a deduction to Jacoby Brissett's completion rate. All those things are taken down because we know that he is facing the Texans. And guess what? He still comes in this range. And so that's why I'm comfortable with him as a low-end wide receiver 1. Worst case scenario, you should be calling him a high-end wide receiver 2, which guess what, guys? That means he's still in all of your fantasy starting lineups, unless you play in my daughter Zoe's league where they only have 6 teams and they start 2 wide receivers. Then maybe you have a team where you're benching Michael Wilson.
It is funny, though, Dwayne. He's our wide receiver 11 consensus. Let's say the Cardinals were at home playing the Titans. Wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6?
Yeah.
Might be too low.
I mean, yeah, we have to. Yeah. He would be in our top 6.
Also note Browns wide receiver Cedric Tillman missing time with a concussion. He is not expected to suit up this week, so maybe a few more targets for Jerry Jeudy and maybe even Isaiah Bond. Some guys who should be good to go, DK Metcalf, who did say as much again after experiencing stomach issues after their game. T. Higgins potentially, guys. He has been limited in back-to-back practices with a concussion. I believe it was Dr. Jeff Mueller who actually had a great episode with Dwayne here on Talk Data to me last Friday. I think he was saying that maybe Higgins actually didn't get another concussion. Maybe it was just kind of lingering impacts from the first one. So I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Neither is Dwayne. Jeff is, though, so we appreciate his contributions. Yeah. But just keep an eye on it. It's a good start, Dwayne, because I was thinking that we might get news on Wednesday it was going to the IR.
Yeah. It's also the Bengals who just brought him right back into that game. So, 3 times. So, I don't know. Maybe there's a different protocol for the Bengals. Maybe they have a different neurological consultant that's not on their staff that is heavily paid. I don't know what's happening with T. Higgins, but it does feel like there's a chance for him to play. I do not have him in the projections right now, but I will be updating that tomorrow if we get more good news.
Higgins in the lineups of all shapes and sizes, if active, would be nice upgrades for Mike Gesicki and probably Mitchell Tinsley, though, if not. Expecting to play, though, now is CeeDee Lamb. He was limited on Wednesday and then got in a full session here on Thursday. Cowboys reporter Todd Archer did say, barring a setback, it would appear as if he will play on Sunday. So good news there for CeeDee. Again, our consensus wide receiver 6 on the week. Guys practicing in a limited fashion include Lab McConkey, Rome Odunze, Jordan Addison, Parker Washington, Josh Palmer, Olamide Zaccheaus, Dontavian Wicks, and Matthew Golden. Again, when we are seeing guys practicing in a limited fashion, we do usually expect them to play. The Jordan Addison Achilles issue is new, so I will keep a little bit of an eye on that. But again, the fact he's out there anyway should be good enough news there. Dwayne, if we do see Rome Odunze back in action again from having a stress fracture in his foot that was supposed to keep him out of the picture there for longer, he's certainly not getting anywhere close to our circle of trust. I probably have him more so as like a low-end wide receiver 3. I think I can get behind Rome ahead of guys like for the Colts and like the 80 Mitchells of the world, but wouldn't be a must start by any stretch.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to have a very cold game here. You're playing against the Browns. There's a lot of bad things going on for Rome. Re-aggravation of injury, low-end wide receiver 3. I agree with the names you just gave. That's about where we would slot him, but we're not going to put him ahead of any bigger names than that.
Some we have ranked much higher. Dwayne's wide receiver 16, my wide receiver 23, and maybe I should be even higher on him there, is former Ohio State Buckeye Terry McLaurin for the Commanders, doing good things since coming back from injury, Dwayne. He had 54 yards and a touchdown, 96 yards and a touchdown, and he has a dud last week, but let's face it, nothing was getting going there against the Brian Flores' Minnesota Vikings. So this week, going up against the Giants defense that loves to play man coverage and is quite bad at it, I would love to hear what that Xfinity best ceiling is, Dwayne, because I'm sure it's quite high.
Yeah, it's 20.2 points. So really nice. His median projection is 13.3. You mentioned over these last 2 healthy games, he's been very involved. He's got 9.5 targets per game, Ian, and 135 air yards per game. And he completely cooked the Broncos with Marcus Mariota under center. Now, guys, in one game, guys, anything can happen. And that's proof right there. What the Commanders did with the Broncos 2 weeks ago with Mariota is maybe the way I should be pronouncing the quarterback name, Ian. But we've got Zach Ertz gone from the equation. So this is going to be a very consolidated passing attack. Noah Brown is back. He's really the third wide receiver, though, guys. He's not someone that really generally earns a lot of targets. So that means it's going to be mostly Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. And we know what Deebo Samuel's role is. It's hanging out around the line of scrimmage, working more underneath, doing those sort of things. And they're letting McLaurin really play against man coverage. Deebo also historical splits against man because of the type of schemed up stuff that he does, Ian. He doesn't get a lot of targets in those games. So that's another positive here for Terry McLaurin. I did worry, like, do I have him too high? And I just started looking at all the names he's around. And I do feel like I did go back and get eyes on him over these last 2 games. Like, he looks healthy, man. And if Terry McLaurin looks healthy, like, I'm down for it right now. I do think Mariota's playing good enough to support him. I think he leads this team in targets pretty easily this weekend, and he has a shot at making a couple of big plays.
Now, I see where you have him ranked, and I could get that. Dwayne has him ahead of guys like, say, Flowers, Ladd McConkey, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jacoby Myers. And while I wouldn't necessarily say McLaurin's like in a completely different tier, stratosphere, of those guys, certainly deserves to be in that conversation. And I see what you are preaching. Other than the Noah Brown slander, Dwayne, some of us are relying on Noah Brown in our 32-team divisional round. So please send a little bit better vibes there in the future. Go Buckeyes. Texans wide receiver Nico Collins, Dwayne, someone who, again, was looking like one of the bigger busts of the season at wide receiver, at least to the first 6 or 7 weeks. Not so much anymore, up to wide receiver 10 in PPR points per game on the season. The wide receiver 8 since week 9. So good stuff from Nico Collins, and wheels up against the Cardinals secondary that, doesn't exactly scare us here.
Yeah, man, the Cardinals are boosting opposing passing attacks by 0.7 touchdowns per game over the last 4 weeks. They've dealt with some injuries in the secondary, and they just managed to get into these shootout games, Ian, every single week, mostly them in comeback mode, but they tend to make the game closer. But they're good enough, right, to kind of stay in a game, even though we really do think the Texans have one of the best defenses in the league. But the big thing you mentioned, Collins has just been on a heater, man. So I'll split it one more way. You already gave 2 splits, but over the last 6 games, he has a 27% target share, 17.6 fantasy points per game. He's the number 4 wide receiver over that time frame. So he projects for 15.4 fantasy points. He's got a 23.4 Xfinity best ceiling. That's one of the best marks on the slate. He's my wide receiver 6 this week.
Another wide receiver who, again, really was doom and gloom there for a while, but all of a sudden you look up and he's putting up some numbers. A.J. Brown for the Eagles, who after he went viral for basically saying to trade me, do not start me in fantasy football, has now emerged as the PPR wide receiver 3 since week 11, behind only Michael Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So 4 straight games with double-digit targets, Dwayne. I know the Eagles aren't winning, and I know A.J. Brown had a couple near-miss opportunities that would have been a lot cooler if he did make the play on Monday night, but all in all, playing good football, and once again in a matchup that we certainly shouldn't be afraid of.
Yeah, I mean, well, when we look at the Packers, they actually, at that week 10 game when he got shut down and what happened with him, like, that's a tough matchup. And so, like, A.J. Brown, like, not coming up big in that game and then going on Twitch afterwards and, doing his rant while he's playing video games, maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to us. So maybe we should just be thanking the Packers for having a good secondary. Sorry, Swing, for saying that. Swing is the Bears fan here. But when we look at the last 4 games, since that, Ian, 44%, 29%, 44%, and 37% target shares. You get a matchup with the Raiders this weekend. I mean, the only question is, like, can the Raiders stay in the game? And with the way the Eagles have played over these last few weeks, maybe. I mean, you picked Ashton Genty as your hardest heater, so maybe there's a chance they keep this game close. But the bottom line is, man, there's been so much volume, and historically, A.J. Brown's been such a good player. So it's not one of these trends where we're like, oh, okay, like, it's a trend that probably just goes away. Like, A.J. Brown's basically playing like A.J. Brown at this point. So he's a top 10 wide receiver for me this week. 22.2 Xfinity best ceiling with a 14.9 PPR projection.
Sliding down the ranks to less auto starts here, but still guys we want in more lineups than not. Jacoby Myers, Dwayne, your wide receiver 24, my wide receiver 22, ahead of what could be a smash spot against the Jets. This was one of the games and one of the players I highlighted in my 7 Things article, where again, we try to look at some of the man coverage splits from bad defenses, pair them with wide receivers and offenses who are getting fed more against man coverage. And again, Jacoby is clearing that, and also just playing pretty darn good football overall. Wide receiver 11 in PPR points per game over these last 4 weeks, Dwayne. Good football players making good plays. Love to see Jacoby back in our good graces here.
Yeah, and Jacoby's a player that we've talked about over the years. Like, it's just always being someone that's underrated. Is he a superstar wide receiver? No, but he should get more respect than what he does. And we're seeing that over the last 4 full games with the Jaguars. He's technically he's been on the team for 5 games, but really only playing that full-time role for 4 of them. He leads the team, Ian, with a 90% route participation rate. That's a really good number. 27% target share. That's wide receiver 1 territory. And 38% of the end zone targets. So that's kind of a newfound thing for Jacoby Myers, is getting targeted by Trevor Lawrence once they get down in that green zone, getting plenty of opportunities. So the Jaguars have the 4th highest team total in Friedman's model at 26.6. So we got a player getting targets, a team expected to score a lot of points, a guy that's been getting looks in the end zone. Yeah, I like Jacoby Myers, low-end wide receiver 2 this week.
Again, very kind of long. You could argue, I would say, from like wide receiver 18 to even like wide receiver 30 kind of tier of receivers, but we do prefer several of them. Obviously, that's why we have them ranked the way they do. Jacoby Myers and another one who falls in that bucket, Dwain Jennings, going up against the Titans defense that is bad overall, but is stout enough at the line of scrimmage with Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat to, I think, encourage teams to throw the football more than they might otherwise would, given the fact that, again, we see plenty of teams build leads on the Titans. So, again, both of our wide receivers 25, and even with Ricky Pearsall back in the lineup, man, hasn't stopped Jennings from working as this offense's wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so Jennings over the last 4 games looking a lot healthier than when he had 27 broken ribs, Ian. He and George Kittle are tied for the team lead in target share, not Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey's at 22%, but Jennings and Kittle both at 25% apiece. And it does feel like right now, like at least at this point, Pearsall's really being used more as a decoy. He is a guy that can get down the field and do things, but they're not really highly integrating him into a lot of the looks and design stuff that they do for the wide receivers and for Kittle sometimes in the offense. So you mentioned the Titans, really more of a funnel defense over the last 6 games. But if you look at what they've done for opposing pass catchers, they have boosted pass catching yardage by 52.5 yards and 0.6 touchdowns per game over the last month of football, while they have held down opposing rushing attacks. So yeah, it's one of these funnel defenses we like. Jennings looking good. So he's a borderline wide receiver 2, right there in that same range for me as Jacoby Myers we just talked about. A little lower projection, 10.9 fantasy points in the fantasy life projection model, but a ceiling very similar, 17.2 Xfinity best.
Last one before our bull calls, but another guy who, again, was checking off the boxes we look for in our man coverage splits. Jerry Jeudy, Dwayne, who, yes, has had a bad season overall, but maybe starting to come on strong. Obviously caught the 60-yard touchdown last week. And just given, some of the QB issues to be nice that Cleveland has had for the majority of this season, I don't think we can just immediately assume that the guy who had north of 1,200 yards last year is suddenly bad at football. So it is going to be cold. And again, Jeudy is coming as Dwayne's wide receiver 36, my wide receiver 43. Not a must start by any stretch of the imagination, but closer flex decision, Dwayne. I do think Jeudy has some good things working in his favor.
Yeah, look, he scares me to death in a playoff matchup, but Shedeur Sanders has at least shown that there can be a ceiling in the passing game. And that's really all we've needed for Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, we know, is not a wide receiver 1 overall talent, but he's a guy that can be a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3 in any given year, depending on how things are going with his team. And let's just face it, things are looking better for the Browns right now with Shedeur Sanders under center. So yeah, I call, even though I have him wide receiver 36 in the article, I still call Jerry Jeudy a boom bust wide receiver 4. I do not want you guys getting overconfident, but the Bears have boosted opposing passing game wide receiver attacks. They're the number 3 boost for wide receivers, Ian, at 5.2 fantasy points per game on the season.
Feels gross to trust Jerry Jeudy in the playoffs. I hear you, but we're about to get even grosser, guys. It's time to go hard or go home. Are you going to go hard in your leagues and start these guys, or will you go home? This is Go Hard or Go Home, fueled by the bold flavors of Mike's Hard Lemonade, the official drink of those who go hard for their league. Dwayne, your wide receiver sicko start of the week.
Jaden Higgins, for the second time this season, we're going to use Higgins, but only rostered in 42% of Yahoo leagues, so he comes in under the 50%. He's only in 19% of starting lineups. Still in a rotation. he's the wide receiver 2, technically, on the Texans. Like, if we look at his route participation over the last 5 games at 59%, that is the highest behind Nico Collins. But it's still a 59%, guys. So he's still rotating with Christian Kirk. We got Xavier Hutchinson doing his thing, Jalen Noel rotating in some, depending on what they're trying to do. But over that period, he still averaged 11.3 fantasy points per game, Ian, and he's got a 20% target share. So he's only really had one bad fantasy performance over that stretch. That was week 14 when he gave you 6.4 fantasy points, but he still had a 23% target share in that game. So I feel pretty good about him, a young ascending player. And then there's always the added benefit of a guy like this, Ian, where we never know, could this be the week where they just decide, we're done with this rotation? Jaden Higgins has played good enough. We're just going to give him an 85% route participation rate. We're not projecting that, but it can happen in any week. We don't always get notification that this is going to happen. In fact, usually when we get a notice that something's going to happen, like from a reporter on something like this, it doesn't pan out. So you're almost better not getting that. And we've seen that over the history. Like Rashee Rice is a great example of a player that kind of kept bumping up, and he would plateau off in his rookie year. And then suddenly, boom, it just clicked and they just gave him that full-time role. So that's always a potential. Still, even without that, just projecting him in this part-time role this week, Ian, Texans have the 7th highest team total at 26 points. The Cardinals have given up 0.7 passing touchdown boost, like I talked about earlier, over the last 4 games. Xfinity best ceiling of 14.9 with a median projection of 9.2. So he's a mid-range wide receiver 4, but I like the upside of somehow this is the week where they hand over the full-time role. You've already got him on your roster for the rest of the playoffs, and it's not too bad of a schedule for the Texans.
And he's been just making the most out of his opportunities by and large. He's actually number 1 on the Texans this year in passer rating when targeted amongst their, again, bazillion wide receivers and tight ends that they seem to rotate during the course of any given week. So I like that call. And I think he's kind of passed the eye test, guys. I know Dane Brugler coming out actually comped him to Nico Collins, more so as a prospect. Nico Collins, not saying he was going to walk in and be a top 10 wide receiver or anything like that. But again, just eye test overall. Higgins has been playing some good football. Hopefully better statistical days are here to come. For the Hartitz Heater, we are going absolutely full sicko mode here. Dwain, are both of our wide receivers 56? Rashid Shaheed, I'm just saying he's going to catch a long touchdown, okay? That might be his only target of the game. I understand this is, again, a scary low goose egg sort of floor, but I just like the spot for the Seahawks passing game, okay? And I understand that usually throughout the season it has just been Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it very well could be again. We're looking at the Seahawks as huge favorites here, where Sandaro might not have to throw the football that much, but man, this is a Colts defense that, again, runs a ton of man coverage. They haven't been all that great, and now they're just ridiculously injured, bro. Like losing Sauce Gardner and now Charvarius Ward, that is a huge red flag, and I would like to think at some point someone other than Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to benefit. I mean, all due respect to Torrey Horton, okay? He's been on IR. Torrey Horton made some big plays, Dwayne. I know Rashid Shaheed is as good, and I think better than Torrey Horton. Why can't he make some big plays here moving forward? Had his highest target share of the season last week. It does seem like he is finally integrated in this offense. I've gotten burned on expecting big gains from Rashid Shaheed so far this year, and I understand that, again, there is a JSN just eating up all the targets, but only need a couple potentially against this defense. Also, I'll give Shaheed some credit for, again, demanding a lot of targets and generally doing good things with them against man coverage specifically. So no Sauce, no Ward. Give me Shaheed at least scoring one long touchdown. What could go wrong? But guys, that's going to wrap up this week's Go Hard or Go Home, brought to you by Mike's Hard Lemonade, because playing it safe is how you end up watching the playoffs from the couch. Getting into quarterbacks now here on the Fantasy Live Show. Top 12 are on your screen right meow, led off by Mr. Josh Allen, then a couple of pocket passers in Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow. Drake May, QB4, Jalen Hurts, QB5, and welcome back Lamar Jackson into the top 6. Rounding out QB7 through 12, we got Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jackson Dart, Brock Purdy, and Trevor Lawrence. Dwayne, we did want to go through just a few injuries, but nothing too crazy here. I will note that Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels and Raiders quarterback Geno Smith are out. Going to be Marcus Mariota and Kenny Pickett accordingly. Mariota comes in just a little bit after Trevor Lawrence, who is dealing with an ankle injury in his own right. Still been limited in practice, though, and not expecting too much to go on there. The Jets QBs are a little bit more concerning. Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields not practicing. It does look like we're going to have Brady Cook under center, which, yeah, is pretty horrible news for anyone expecting good things out of A.D. Mitchell and company. And finally, with the Colts, I think it's going to be Phillip Rivers at this point, man. Riley Leonard's actually fine. He's practicing in full. Like they were kind of making it sound like he could just be straight up out here for a few weeks. But Stephen Holder, one of the Colts better reporters, just I don't even want to say better, one of the beat reporters, and I like the work Stephen does. How about that? But he was just saying based on what he's seen inside the building, you can kind of tell who's going to be the starting quarterback, and he does believe it's going to be Rivers. So Dwain, I think anyone kind of pretending like they know what we're going to get from Phillip Rivers on Sunday is kidding themselves. Like, come on, the dude has not played a football game in 5 years. So who knows? But yeah, do you agree it should be Phillip Rivers at this point?
That's who I have projected, and I have him projected as quarterback 32 out of 32 because I have no clue what we're going to get out of him. It could definitely be better than that. Like, he's got weapons around him. Like, I think you could make an argument, and that's just the projection, guys. Like, in the rankings, like, I could see starting him over Kenny Pickett, Kirk Cousins, even potentially Cam Ward. But again, like, I don't know. I really don't know what to expect. So I've got it projected really low. I've got them leaning into the run game, just trying to run the wheels off of Jonathan Taylor as long as they can, and just hoping that Phillip Rivers can manage the game and keep them in it, and maybe throw a couple of touchdown passes, maybe not a lot of yardage, but don't get picked off is the big thing.
And I was even able to, I know I have a dynasty team where we're pretty good everywhere, okay? But the quarterback has been a struggle. We're rotating through guys. And I got Flacco for $0, guys. Or not Flacco, sorry, Phillip Rivers for $0. So no, for the love of God, please do not start him this week. But if we see him look passable, Dwain, I could see him getting into that, QB 20 or so conversation as soon as week 16. Someone who, of course, though, is readily higher up in the rankings than some old man like Phillip Rivers is young man Lamar Jackson, who, Dwain, for the first time in 5 weeks did not have a missed practice because of an injury designation. Okay, Lamar still did not practice Wednesday, but they actually went ahead and just said it was non-injury related and rest, which I do think adds up to the eye test telling us that Lamar looked better than he has in quite some time last week against the Steelers. So obviously the fantasy points and the rushing yards told us that, but God forbid, Dwain, we get the best version of Lamar here against the Bengals. Why can't the guy boom?
Yeah, and we haven't fully embraced Lamar yet in the rankings. If we did, right, he would be in the top 2 quarterbacks this week if we had the old Lamar and the matchup that we're talking about. But we have gotten him back into our consensus top 6 guys. So we're trusting him more than last week, which I think our consensus last week, Ian, was like QB 9 or QB 10 for Lamar, somewhere in that range. But he gave us the 22.1 fantasy points last week against the Steelers. Also, he tied his second highest season mark with 7 rushing attempts. Also looked pretty good, getting those 46 rushing yards and that touchdown. And then now we get the week where we don't have the practice limitation. So I think, to your point, like, seeing him do what he did, then now seeing him not on the injury report is really all we needed for Lamar to at least get him back in that range where he's probably going to be in most of your starting lineups, unless one of you guys like picked up Joe Burrow because he got dropped and you stashed him on your IR spot. You're going to start Joe Burrow. Maybe you drafted Lamar and you took Drake May later. You're going to start Drake May. But that's the decision, man. That's getting pretty close between those two. And I would say anybody that can tell you for sure who's going to score more points between Lamar and Drake May, like, it's a coin flip. Like, Lamar could still easily outscore him. So the Bengals, the number 2 fantasy boost for quarterbacks this year, Ian, at 5.2 points per game. We got a good team total here for the Ravens. Friedman Friedman has it as the 4th highest team total in his betting model.
And again, I know the Bengals did a good job against Lamar and the Ravens on Thanksgiving evening, but that said, guys, like, we went over it in the recap edition, that was a just weird game from the pass catchers. Isaiah Likely dropping the football as he's about to go across the goal line and score. Zay Flowers having a 40-yard touchdown nullified on what really didn't seem like that big of a push-off. Devontae Walker dropping multiple bombs as well. Lamar realistically was just a few different plays away from having 20-plus fantasy points in that game. And even last week, Dwain, like, I don't think anyone was complaining about the 21 fantasy points, but if what everyone agreed consensusly in America had just been viewed as a catch for Isaiah Likely, we're talking about Lamar coming back from just having 25 points against the Steelers.
Yeah, absolutely. Even potentially more than that. So I think the big thing with Lamar is, like, even though I've got him still as a slight downgrade in what I've got him projected versus when the season began, right? For his involvement in the design run game, for his scramble rate, those things are, even last week, those are still lower than like his historical averages. But like, the ceiling is still so big. His Xfinity best ceiling is 25.8. That's still one of the top 3 on the slate because he can still beat you in both ways. And we know when Lamar goes off as a rusher, it's not just, he gave me 40 yards and a touchdown. Like, the guy can go off for 100 rushing yards and a touchdown, then throw for 200 and throw for another 3 passing touchdowns. So if you're needing ceiling, Lamar is your man. If you're an let me ask you this, Ian. You're an underdog in your matchup, and you have to start Lamar Jackson or Drake May. I'm starting Lamar. If I'm an underdog, I'm starting Lamar. I'm sorry. I love Drake May. He's had a great year, but Lamar's ceiling is ridiculous if he hits on all cylinders. Like, he's one of the few guys that can give you 40.
Lamar's best game beats Drake May's best game. Lamar's best game beats everyone's best game other than Josh Allen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good talk. Another guy who, again, would be much higher in our ranks if we did have a better belief. And the rushing floor is one Jackson Darton. I'll say this, Dwayne, you brought it up earlier for the Devin Singletary, and it was good news for him. But honestly, my almost bigger concern for Dart isn't so much the lack of design rushes. Like, that does matter, but it's just the cowardly nature that we've seen this offense have under Mike Kafka. For that game to be 31-7 at halftime against the Patriots, and then for Dart to finish with 24 pass attempts, like, come on, man. So that's more so my biggest concern here versus the design rushing stuff.
In the model, it's the design rushing stuff that really hurts him. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Theoretically, if he was still involved in the design run game, we really wouldn't care. We'd be like, oh, they're running the ball all the time, and Jackson Dart's still part of it, and we would be fine. Yeah. So I do have this projected as a team that wants to run the ball more, number one. And I also took away part of his design rushing attempts. I docked him 5% of his design rushing attempts versus what he's averaged for the season, which is at 14%. I've only got him at 9% this week. Some of you could argue that that should be even lower. I just don't think we know for sure. So I've taken him down, but I still have him a guy that's he's above the league average for design rushing attempts. So he projects for 17.9 fantasy points, Ian, but similar to what we just talked about with Lamar, again, Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson, not trying to compare things, but it's a dual threat quarterback. So a 24.3 Xfinity best ceiling. And that's just the kind of thing you're going to get when you have these quarterbacks like this, Ian. So he's my QB8 this week.
And yeah, Lamar is Lamar, but man, before Dart, they really, before when the training wheels were off and they were just letting Jackson Dart do his thing, like no one was racking up more fantasy points from just rushing than Mr. Dart. So not having those days coming back, but even if we can get 60% of that, man, this ranking will look
great
small.
Too.
Someone who is again, 100%. Another good matchup is going for 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy against the Tennessee Titans. Your QB 11, my QB 10. I do have Purdy one spot ahead of Jackson Dart and Dwayne. I just think it's because my overall comfort level with the 49ers offense. That said, it's not like we've seen Purdy completely blown the doors off of defenses since he did return from injury. I am really hoping here that bye week really got him closer to 100%.
Yeah, and look, we have a lot of good quarterbacks with pretty tough matchups this week. And so that's also impacting the way that these rankings are working out. Ian talked about the funnel defense earlier for Tennessee whenever we talked about Juwan Jennings as a pass catcher. And so the same thing applies here, for Brock Purdy. The 49ers have actually leaned more into the run game, Ian, since his return with a minus 4% drop back rate over expected. But I think in this matchup, we will see them potentially loosen the reins a little bit on the passing game. I think that's going to be the better way to attack the Titans, who are dealing with even more injuries in their secondary. So Purdy projects for 16.6 fantasy points this week. He's got a 21.4 Xfinity best ceiling. I would call him a borderline QB1, but he's definitely a guy that I would be willing to stream this week, even in the fantasy playoffs. If I have questions around someone like, I'm playing him over Caleb Williams, players like that, I'm actually playing Brock Purdy.
Guys, Sicko start in just a second. We did just receive word, though. I said earlier I wasn't worried about Devontae Adams. He actually got a second straight DNP now, Dwayne. That is not ideal. Last week, again, he was DNP, limited practice, and then full practice. Any sort of big riser for you if, God forbid, Devontae Adams is out of the picture? Look, Puka Nacua, take him from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 1, but U2 is going to be back in the picture. Like, I just tend to think probably more targets to the tight ends than anything. Like maybe Colby Parkinson gets a little bit more of a boost.
Yep, they're using so much of this 13 personnel stuff. And last week it was Parkinson finally breaking the 70% route participation rate, but it's only one game. They could go right back to splitting it 3 ways. We've got at least one more game before Tyler Higbee is eligible to return and make it a 4-way split. But I'll be honest, Parkinson's probably the one name that I would give a slight bump up the ranks, Ian. And he would kind of be a Sicko type start, though. Like, he's still a guy that you really need to be down. You need to be down in the dumps if you're going to be starting any of the other Rams besides what we have with Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, and potentially Blake Corum, and some of you guys playing in deeper leagues.
We are talking about quarterbacks right now. Do you think that would actually warrant moving Stafford down a little bit? Because I don't know, man. If Adams is on the field, I feel like the Rams might be more liable just to hand the ball off inside the 5.
Potentially, but man, like that game totals probably won't even move. That team total probably might move a half a point. And maybe that's not enough given how important Devontae Adams has been to the touchdown production for Matthew Stafford. But I could see getting Stafford down like below Lamar. That's about as far as I could go, though, Ian. Probably QB 7. Yeah. And even then, like, I wouldn't be super confident in moving him down that far.
I agree with that. So let's get far grosser than QB7. It's time for the sicko start, Mr. Dwain. Who is the QB that, again, might make you a little bit of sick to start, but then again, sometimes you got to be sick to go ahead and get those fantasy points?
It is Marcus Mariota, Ian. So when we look at him this year, he's given you QB 6, 17, 20, 12, QB 8, and QB 4 performances. Okay, so it's been nice in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. Like, they have a scheme that works well for what Mariota does. We have Terry McLaurin healthy. We have Deebo Samuel. We won't have Zach Ertz. That does hurt a little bit. But I think with McLaurin back, man, that's the main thing. And then we know what Mariota can do on the ground. He's been doing it for the course of his career. If we look at the ability to spike as both a passer and a rusher, he checks both of those boxes. So his Xfinity best ceiling, 23.4 fantasy points. I don't normally get to name a sicko call that has a ceiling that high. His median projection is 17. Let's be honest, guys. The only reason he gets to be a sicko is because he's only rostered in 8% of Yahoo leagues. And that's because a lot of people, Jaden Daniels returned last week. So when you look at that median projection of 17, like to Ian's point, like, you could make an argument that Mariota should be in our top 12. He's not quite there for me because we have a week where there's not any teams on bye. So I have him as a borderline QB1, but he is definitely someone that you can play this week against the Giants, who have given up a nice fantasy boost to quarterbacks this season.
It felt dirty, Dwain, crossing out Jaden Daniels and just putting Marcus Mariota where he was in the ranks. I didn't think we would be reaching that point in the year 2025, but hey, that's just the way the cookie has crumbled here this season. For the heart heater, again, we are getting even sicker. I'm looking like, the level of sickness here, Dwain, is Nick Wright on First Things First being wheeled into the studio. Hilarious segment, by the way. Kudos to everyone involved there. But give me Tyler Shuck staying hot here and eclipsing 20 fantasy points against the Carolina Panthers. Tyler Shuck, guys, would be my recommended deeper sleeper streaming quarterback if you need one, a super flex sort of format for the stretch run here, because the Panthers won a good enough matchup, 23rd in EPA per drop back this year. But week 16 and week 17, guys, Jets and Titans 28th and 29th, signed me up for that, because Shuck, even before last week, was already flashing a lot as a passer. Honestly, probably should have had a game-winning touchdown to Chris Olave against the Dolphins. Unfortunately, couldn't come down with it. But then we really did see the rushing upside rear its head in a beautiful way for everyone that started Shuck last week. Again, the third best fantasy performance of the season, actually, from Tyler Shuck in terms of rushing fantasy points, only behind Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. So again, Tyler Shuck, I would like to think for all of you guys playing in one quarterback leagues, you have a better option out there. But Dwain, I'm actually going on Talk Data to Me tomorrow with you, and just already was saying, man, among quarterbacks you can get as streamers right now, I think Shuck is the top one on the list.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good list, but I do think that Shuck belongs at the top of it. He's a young ascending player. He's now shown a dual threat capability. He's got some playmakers around him with Olave. Juwan Johnson's a nice piece. And then we also have Devon Vele doing a little bit. Look, guys, we're not saying that's one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, but it's fine. Like, you can get by with it. Olave really is the guy that can stir the drink there. So yeah, I do like Tyler Shuck as far as rest of season projections go. If you guys are looking up and maybe you had to deal with the Daniel Jones injury, maybe you had Jaden Daniels, you thought you had him back and now you don't, you're worried about what his next few weeks look like, Tyler Shuck is definitely a name to have at the top of the list.
A what the Shuck sort of play, Tyler Shuck here down the stretch. We'll see what happens. Let's close things out here on the Fantasy Life Show with a look at tight ends. Top 12 Fantasy Life tight ends on your screen right now. We got Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers as our clear-cut top 3 tight ends, followed by, yes, Harold Fannin, the rookie, cracking our top 4. Kyle Pitts, tight end 5. Jake Ferguson, tight end 6. Closing things out, Travis Kelce, Tyler Warren, Brenton Strange, Dalton Kincaid, Theo Johnson, and Mark Andrews. So, Dwain, it really is Harold Fannin being the one sticking out. And I think deservedly so, man. Ever since Shedeur Sanders actually came out under center, we're talking about Harold Fannin not just being the tight end 1 in Cleveland, but the MB being the number 1 pass game option, period. 22 targets, man. Jerry Jeudy's in second at 12, all in on Harold Fannin, and that's why he's our tight end 4 this week.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Over the last 3 weeks, he's taken over that full-time role. He's got an 87% route participation rate. He's got a 28% target share. Yes, last week David Njoku got hurt, but even before that, he had an 83% route participation rate with Njoku in that game. So it's just a guy that we really liked, Ian, coming out of college. He has the 9th best tight end rookie supermodel score going back to over the last 5 years. So really productive guy in college. And now we've seen that translate over to his time in the NFL. And with Shedeur Sanders giving us a new ceiling in this passing game, like he's the player on the Browns offense besides Quinshon Judkins, like that I am willing to trust, like in fantasy playoff lineups. I know we talked about Jerry Jeudy as a boom bust wide receiver 4, but if I'm having to start anybody from the Browns, they're named Harold Fannin Jr. or Quinshon Judkins. So yeah, you already saw in the projections, guys, in the top 4. 12.2 is his medium projection in PPR with an 18.2 Xfinity best ceiling. It's probably going to come down a tad. I've had to adjust that a little bit for the weather, Ian, but still going to be over that 17 mark.
And we saw worse weather in Cleveland last week, though, and it was just one game. But Fannin honestly was leaned on more than ever there. And I do think there is some correlation to the lower ADOT tight ends, probably finding more opportunities than, downfield wide receivers, at least when Mother Nature is being a real, biatch about it. So looking at the injuries, though, Dwayne, you mentioned David Njoku. He has not practiced at all this week, nor has Elijah Arroyo, maybe a nice little bump for AJ Barner, nor Mason Taylor for any of you sickos out there actually trying to keep a Jets tight end on your roster at this point. I will say the big injury, Dwayne, that we probably do need to keep an eye on. Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys, with a calf issue, limited on Wednesday, but was dropped to a DNP on Thursday. So look, CD and Pickens, that's fine. We all love them, and we're starting them regardless of Ferguson. But this is a situation, Dwayne, where if anyone out there is listening to us and you're trying to decide between, Kyle Pitts and Jake Ferguson right now, like that's a problem. And I would go ahead and take Pitts. Any big changes in the projections in terms of another Cowboys tight end you like? Because I just feel like we probably see a bunch of guys rotating.
No, I think ultimately the guy that might benefit the most would be Javonte Williams. We do see trade-offs with running back and tight end targets, especially for guys like Ferguson that are low ADOT. So maybe a slight bump for Ryan Flournoy if we don't have Ferguson. But I think that Javonte is probably the guy that gets the biggest bump. And then you mentioned Kyle Pitts. You're having to make an early decision on that one, Ian. And when we look at Pitts, like over these last 3 games with Drake London out, who's going to be out again with that PCL injury, 28% target share. He's the tight end 7 with 11.6 fantasy points per game over that span. He's got the 7th highest utilization score at an 81. Remember, guys, that's on a scale of 0 to 100. And the Buccaneers have given up 259 yards and 2 touchdowns passing per game over the last month of football. So it is a team that you can get to through the air. So Pitts, mid-range tight end 1. And I agree, if you're having to make this decision tonight with the LP down to DNP for Ferguson, and let's be honest, we already had Pitts ahead of Ferguson in our ranks already. So this just makes it easier. I would go ahead and lean into Pitts.
So Ferguson does not play, and the Cowboys don't play, obviously, until Sunday night against the Vikings. If we have a game time decision going on, Dwayne, I mean, have to go through the Sunday games. I'm saying like Oronde Gadsden, Isaiah Likely, tight end 18, tight end 19. I probably even like Colby Parkinson, bro.
Yeah, like I'm leaning into Gadsden in that situation. Like there's some things we don't like about what's going on with him, but yeah, I mean, it's in that range.
No Devontae Adams. I would play Colby Parkinson over Jake Ferguson if we are looking at a true game time sort of decision. Obviously, if we have any amount of belief that Ferguson will be out there, then we would still be expecting good things there. Another guy who we certainly will be playing over Jake Ferguson if we do have some uncertainty, Dwayne, Ravens tight end Mark Andrews, who ever since he got that big time bag from the Ravens, seemingly has taken a backseat to Isaiah Likely, at least in terms of the counting numbers. That said, when we are facing off against the Bengals defense, maybe, just maybe, both Andrews and Likely can put up some big time numbers here.
Yeah, and one other thing is last week Andrews actually saw his largest playing time of the season. He had an 86% route participation rate. So I know he didn't come through in the box score, guys, but over time, if he's out there more, like it's going to lead to more fantasy points. Mark Andrews, not the tight end that he once was, but he's still the number 2 target on the team behind Zay Flowers. So you get the Bengals matchup, which you talked about, Ian, 9.2 fantasy point boost per game to opposing tight end rooms. That is 6 points ahead of the number 2 matchup, which is the Commanders at a 3.2 point boost. So 3x almost they were getting. Cincinnati, a true outlier matchup for tight ends this year. Andrews is a low end tight end 1.
And just in terms of raw PPR points per game allowed, it's the Bengals, and the gap between them and the Jaguars is the same gap between the Jaguars and the Raiders, who are the third best defense against tight ends, Dwayne. So really can't say enough bad things about how the Bengals happen to defend those tight ends. And by the way, they will continue to be without Trey Hendrickson. He is officially done for the season and on IR. That takes us to, though, the Sicko start, Mr. Dwayne. It will not be a Ravens tight end. However, you are sticking with the same game. Who you got?
Yeah, look, it could be Isaiah Likely, guys. You could go with Isaiah Likely here very easily, because when I wrote this, it's Mike Gesicki. But now we have the news that maybe T. Higgins is going to get cleared by the people that get paid a lot of money to clear the Bengals players from concussions. Ian. So if we do have T. Higgins, we know that hurts Gesicki. But when I wrote this up, if you look at the history of these games with Joe Burrow and Mike Gesicki without T. Higgins, it's been pretty good, man. 11.9 fantasy points per game. I know you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, that's not great. Well, if you don't have one of the top three tight ends, 11.9 fantasy points per game is pretty good, guys. That's typically going to be in that wide receiver, or that tight end 10 to tight end 12 range most seasons. Has an Xfinity best ceiling of 14.7 points with a 9.4 median. Again, I do not have T. Higgins as projected in for this game. I won't be making that decision until tomorrow, so you guys can check back. So if we do have T. Higgins, you could easily pivot to Isaiah Likely. I know you got another name here, Ian. One other pivot could be Theo Johnson. He's rostered in 45% of Yahoo League. So a lot more than Mike Gesicki at 3%. So not quite as sick, but still available in roughly half the leagues.
Stealing my freaking thunder. How dare you, Dwayne? The hardest heater, it is Theo Johnson. I'm saying he's going to score twice against those Washington Commanders. Oh, you're good, man. I'm just playing. But yes, he is both Dwayne and myself's tight end 11. And it was just one of those things that popped up when I was looking at some of the man coverage stuff. You almost always see wide receivers being the ones benefiting against, again, more man-heavy defenses, which makes sense. Tight ends, running backs, a little bit easier to cover. But hey, Theo Johnson, not your everyday tight end. And accordingly, he actually has seen better numbers in yards per out run and target share against man-heavy defenses, of which the Commanders qualify. So Commanders are actually dead last in terms of EPA allowed per dropback. So probably even overthinking it, okay? Really bad defense going up against an offense that, let's face it, other than Wan'Dale Robinson, doesn't have, a true trusted target earner on that team right now. So why not see Theo Johnson get peppered from targets by Mr. Jackson Dart? Came very close to having a big game against the Patriots. I understand that was still a bad game overall. And yeah, he didn't catch the balls for a reason. He wasn't good enough to get them. But I do think we generally see more good things than bad from Theo Johnson. Freakishly athletic guy in a league full of freak athletes. I just think that, again, we are going to see someone benefit from the Jackson Dart experience here. Why not Theo? So great stuff, Mr. Dwayne. Again, we'll be back actually tomorrow on Talk Data to Me. What we got planned for the masses there, Dwayne?
Well, we are doing a fantasy playoff prep, Ian. So we're going to cover everything from streamers to stash plays to defensive matchups, all that sort of stuff to get you guys ready for the fantasy playoffs.
Keep an eye out for that. And otherwise, just have a great freaking Thursday night. Set those lineups with no fear, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Best of luck to everyone in the fantasy playoffs here this week and beyond. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.